the colonists knew that if they didn't have firearms at their disposal, they would never have been able to claim independence. The British would have steamrolled them, and that would have been that, because you were dealing with, at that time, the most potent and most feared army and armed force in the world, that from England. And even though they didn't have their entire force within the colonies, they had a significant force here. And if we didn't have the ability to fight back on equal terms, if all we had was sticks and stones and a couple of knives, probably would not have worked out so well for us. And those firearms, and I remember listening to a podcast, and I will look it up. So I give it the exact name because I want to give credit to it. It's an amazing podcast, and I'll give it to you in the next episode. There was talk about the fact that at the beginning of the struggles, before war had been declared, before the first shots at Lexington and Concord were made in 1775, all of the colonists, or at least the vast majority of colonists' homes, had some sort of firearm there dating back from, not only for their hunting, because they needed it for basic subsistence, but also from the French and Indian War, which had occurred a decade prior, where they were called up to help fight on behalf of the crown. And they were expected to fall in line. And sometimes they were drafted, sometimes they were brought out. But there were also times where the colonists who were carving into what had been native territories were subject to native tribes coming in, and they had to defend themselves. So they kept firearms in their homes. Americans have always been, how shall I say, we've been used to the fact of having firearms at the ready to protect ourselves. And we're not getting into the good and bad of the French and Indian War and all the other stuff, but just the simple fact that the founding fathers, and in particular in 1791, Madison, when he helped push this forward, knew that it was essential for each household, each person, each locality to be able to defend themselves.
Right. And one of the things, some of the arguments that people have against the Second Amendment on that issue, they're like, okay, well, yes, that may be true, but let's take a look at the historical, again, Lou, we're going to use your historical context against you. Let's take a look at it where when this is going on, where were most of the firearms and gunpowder and supplies stored? In a central location. Yes, that's absolutely on 100%. They were stored in a central location, but that was for the purpose of combining assets, not to restrict the access to it, but actually to make it available so that I got a gun, I need to protect myself or somebody else or my town or get called up. I'm going to be able to go get it. So let's say that they're going to try and like prevent me, and somebody's going to come to my house and prevent me from getting my weapon. Okay, that's great. I've got central weapons over in the town square, which were guarded and protected, not to restrict access, but to ensure access and to ensure that people had the ability to gain access to the firearms, to the gunpowder, to the bullets, to everything that they needed.
And remember, this is 1770s, 1780s, 1790s. The firearms that we have today have a round, which is a self-encased. You have your metal encasement with the powder inside of it, and then the bullet at the end.
The anatomy of a pew.
Exactly. Back then, they needed gunpowder. They had a ball that they would ram down into the barrel, but they would have a charge behind it with gunpowder that they'd fill into the stock and then light it. So they needed to have this stored somewhere, and they needed to have it stored safely, because gunpowder, as you might know, is a little bit problematic if just left out for a spark or something else. The whole thing goes up. So for safety purposes, they kept it out of the houses into a central silo or central repository. And this is where Concord and Lexington comes into play, because that's where the British marched out of Boston to do a reconnaissance and raid, because they heard that there were stores of gunpowder in Concord and Lexington, and they wanted to confiscate it. Those towns had those in the central repository, like Lou said, not to restrict it, but it was for the community's use. It just happened to be in the repository for safety purposes. So, Ma and Pa over here, who have a log cabin and they have an open fire, probably not mixing well with gunpowder in the same one room cabin. Just saying.